Let's talk now to Ralph Schoelhammer, who's one of our great friends here at the new home of Common Sense. And Ralph, it's very good to see you. Very good morning to you. Welcome back.
Mike, so good to be back on again. Congratulations to your new endeavor. I think it's
Thank you.
received
Thank you
very
very
well,
much
as you
indeed.
deserve.
Yeah, it's going really well. We're crossing all sorts of boundaries. We're sort of approaching subjects that nobody else wants to talk about properly. I want to talk to you a little bit about the European Union, because we've got a state of affairs now in this country where Keir Starmer, the hapless Prime Minister of this sceptred isle of ours, wants to have ever closer alignment with the European Union, even though as a country we voted to leave it. There's all sorts of jiggery pokery going on now, because the EU are saying that if we do have closer alignment, they want to have what they're calling a Farage Clause, right, which will make it impossible to reverse any closer alignment if, in fact, Nigel Farage wins the next election in 2027 or 29, whenever it is, or even if the Tories get in. I mean, this is what I call gangster politics. What do you think?
No, this is like the old joke coming true that in order to defend democracy, we have to abolish democracy. I mean, Great Britain, under the scenario you just described, which is accurate, is basically applying to become a colony of Brussels, because this is nothing else. I mean, imagine the scenario. So you say, oh, we can do closer alignment, but this means that whomever the British people vote into office down the road, they can never change it. So if there would be a new Brexit referendum, since the real Brexit never happened, it wouldn't have an effect, because there is the Farage clause or the no Brexit clause. It is an absurd scenario, and it proves once again, I think, that Keir Starmer truly would prefer to be in Brussels or Davos than in Westminster. I mean, it's very hard to deny the quite obvious.
Exactly right. But I mean, the European Union, by any metric, is losing power, right? If you look around what's happening in different individual countries of the EU, they are, at the very least, regaining their personalities. They're moving further away from the super state. They're moving further away from, all being on the same hymn sheet. They want to, emphasize their individuality. It's happening in Germany, in Italy, in France, in Spain. I don't think anyone wants to really be part of that giant machine anymore. So why on earth would Britain want to do?
Well, again, this is a question I've tried to wrap my head around. But one has to also admit the EU is becoming a little bit like a cornered beast, right? It's threatened, so it starts to lash out. You have now these debates in which Keir Starmer is also involved, whether or not there should be a soft ban or hard ban on X or Twitter, or whether social media shouldn't be regulated, who can run for elections. I mean, I was somewhat amused when Europeans constantly complain about Americans commenting on European politics, and that in fact, democracy is so much greater in Europe than it's over there. Maybe it is, but people tend to completely forget there were elections in Romania. There are attempts to hinder Nigel Farage and Reform Party from gaining office, whether it's on mayoral terms or on more federal terms in the UK. There is attempts to ban the AfD in Germany. I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times, but a threatened beast, is a dangerous thing, and I think this is also true for the European Union.
Yeah, absolutely right. You put out an interesting tweet yesterday as well, on the subject of the sort of the European state, if you like, or the European continent. You basically said Europeans are becoming an endangered species. Forget about Greenland, forget about Venezuela, or as we now have to pronounce it, Venezuela. Because that's the way everybody pronounces it now in the media. This is the only thing that matters for Europe. 100 Poles will only have 20 great-grandchildren, 100 Austrians will only have 29, 100 Italians will only have 22. Is that a trend, or has it always been like that?
No, I mean, what we experience, I mean, it's also happening in South Korea, it's also happening in Japan, but I'm a European, so I care mostly about Europe. And what we are experiencing is the self-extinction of the very nations that built the modern world. And I think that's a tragedy. I think the world will be a sadder place without Austrians, without English, without the French, without the Italians. And the problem is, of course, that as your own population declines, at least in continental Europe, but also the UK, a successor population is already in place. So it's gradually coming into place, if you will. I mean, I observed quite remarkably, if you look at the upcoming mayoral elections in London, and whatever you think about the Reform candidate, it seems to be quite obvious that apparently if you want to become mayor of London these days, you have to be a Muslim. Now, as I always say, you can say this is good, you can say this is bad, but it's obviously not nothing. And this kind of rapid social cultural transformation is something that worries me. I think it worries a growing number of the people in the UK. And once again, right, I think that Laila is a great candidate. I'm sure she's a wonderful person, but it would be very odd that the very city that was the epitome of Western civilization, namely London, in order to become mayor of that city, you basically have to be a Muslim. I think that's an astounding change that one should at least be curious about.
Well, there's one thing that I want to show you here, which actually will make you perhaps sit up and take notice. You may be seeing this in Europe as well. But this is a tweet put out by Nick Buckley a little bit earlier on, over the weekend. And it's about a sign that has started to appear in cities up and down the nation. And I think we can have a look at it.
Following the protesting that is taking place all over the country of Iran now.
Yeah, I'm following it very closely.
And have you read that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei
notice? Now, forgive me for pointing this out, but I mean, I don't think anyone in this country needed to be told that.
I think the same is true, and this is one aspect, but of course something we also talked about on many occasions is the phenomenon of grooming gangs in the UK, of gang rapes in Germany. I mean, you have on average, that's the data from 2024, you have 2 gang rapes per day in Germany. I mean, this is a criminal category that to that extent did not even exist in the German criminal code because it was seen as completely outlandish. The point is, a country is not just its laws, it's people. I mean, we run the experiment. I mean, we've been for 20 years in Afghanistan, we've been in Iraq, we've been to all these places. And if it would be as simple as just implementing, British common law or the US Constitution, and then everybody would turn into Brits or Americans, we would have done it, but that's not how it works. There was a recent tweet, I think I mentioned it before in your show, but it's worthwhile repeating. If you look at the Constitution of Liberia, on paper, it's an incredible constitution. But if you look what's actually happening in Liberia, where I think like one new president at some point ate the ears of his predecessor or something like that, it's not working like that. At the end of the day, it's the people. There is no such thing as a magic soil or a magic document that turns people from Somalia into the people who came off the Mayflower a couple of centuries ago. I mean, we see this also in the United States. We see it in Vienna, by the way, where we have a similar scandal with Islamist kindergartens, very comparable to what's happening in Minnesota at the moment. It's the people, it's not the magic soil, and values are not just like a hat. There's this odd idea that somebody wears his Islamist hat and then he comes to England and he turns on his Western civilization hat. This is not how it works.
Interestingly enough, you've got so many people in the established sort of political centre who are willing to bankroll all of it, So if you do turn up in Minneapolis and you are running a Somalian nursery and you do want to apply for a grant, you will get the money, because everyone is too frightened not to give it to you. And then suddenly it becomes this balloon of fraud. And suddenly now people are talking about it and it's happening all over the place. I mean, there's a story in the Telegraph today about the whole business of Islamophobia, another crazy idea, crazy notion that this government's trying to, define Islamophobia so that, it might be against the law now to sort of criticize somebody who's Islamic or somebody who's got a copy of the Quran. But apparently they now are possibly likely to be discriminating against other faith groups. So it could be actually illegal to even bring in a law against Islamophobia. And they're tying themselves up in knots over this stuff.
Now listen, Mike. I'm sure you've seen this headline that the United Arab Emirates are now curtailing stipends for their students who want to go to the UK and study there because the Emiratis are afraid that they will get radicalized into radical Islam in the UK and then bring that ideology back to the United Arab Emirates. So apparently the Arabs are more Islamophobic than the Brits. And this makes complete sense, right? I mean, there is a bigger issue of Islamism at university campuses in Europe than there is at university campuses, in, for example, the Gulf states. And, if they can be terrified of Islamism, then why can't we be? So nobody would excuse, the Emir of Qatar of being Islamophobic. But even they understand the danger, so they export it. I mean, one has to grant them that they're much smarter than we are.
Exactly right. And, as I say, as we see now from the reaction to what's happening in Iran, there's certain kinds of Islamism which is sort of somehow superior to other kinds of Islamism. And the kind of sympathy, for example, for the Palestinian cause does not seem to expand to the Iranian people's cause, because the same people who want to see a free Palestine apparently want to see the continuation of the Islamic Republic run by mullahs who like shooting young women in the back of the head.
Well, listen, I mean, there's one thing that the Iranian protesters supposedly were chanting, which very much spoke to me, which is when they claimed, justifiably so, that Iran should focus on the Iranian people and not on Hezbollah and not Hamas and not the Palestinians. And this is exactly the same thing I would also demand from our leaders. I mean, look at the contemporary political debate in Europe and the UK. It seems that they care about everything and everybody in the world except their own people. So I'm with the Iranians on that. I think that my state, my government, my country should primarily care about me. And by the way, of course, in the UK, it should be about you. I mean, this is so terribly annoying that the very obvious has to be repeated time and time and time again, that the European states, the states in the West, have to learn to be there for their own people and not for anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, do you think this year is going to change that in any way, shape or form? What do you see happening?
Well, I think 2026 is going to be a very, very interesting year because, as we mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I think that the authoritarian tendencies within the European Union, but also within the UK, they're going to be switched into hypergear. I mean, I think we will experience and see a crackdown on freedom of speech and freedom of opinion that we have never seen before. But there will be a new wrinkle to this because the United States are not run by Hillary Clinton. They are not run by Kamala Harris. They are run by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And so there will be support for people like you, like me, like the British people, you know, the continental Europeans who want free speech and who want political change. I can just recommend to anybody to read the national security strategy that came out of the White House in December. They make very clear they see Europe's civilisational erasure, and I think that is fair to say that this is happening, as a threat to the interests of the United States. I mean, it is absurd, Mike. We discuss the ownership of Greenland. I don't care about Greenland if I'm losing valuable territory in Vienna, in Copenhagen, in Paris, and in London. So if the Americans go to Greenland, or the Americanization of Greenland is a lesser threat to me than the Islamization of our capital cities. So how about if we get our priorities right?
Yeah, maybe we can all move to Greenland if America takes it over. It might actually be a better place to live. We shall see. Ralph Schoelhammer, great to talk to you. Thank you.